Welcome to another episode of Live from the Blue Seats. I'm your host, Rob, joined this week by Dave and producer JL. Full crew is here, and we are going to try to evaluate what we've seen from the Rangers so far after the Four Nations, the 2-week break for the Four Nations. And this is also going to serve as a little bit of a trade deadline preview episode. JL has some poll results or informal poll results that he put something out on Blue Sky a few days ago. We've got some good questions to answer as well. Always are one of the best parts of the show, my favorite part of the show personally. So a lot to get to here on Live from the Blue Seats. JL, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm on my way home, but I'm here doing the podcast with the boys, I guess, if that's what you want to call it.
On the road, literally.
Yeah, literally. I was in, as I mentioned in the last podcast, at least mentioned when I was with you guys, I was in Buffalo and Pittsburgh for both those games after the Four Nations break. So I have some thoughts, but everything's going well. Thank you, guys.
Dave, how about you? What's going on?
JL, you're never allowed to travel for games ever again.
Yeah, and I feel bad for you.
Wait a minute. They won the second game. They won.
Yeah. Okay, first off, we're gonna
quote unquote
because
won.
This is what we spoke
Who
about
really
last
won?
time. Is they look like crap, so it doesn't matter if they won. There is absolutely nothing about those games that screams, "Yay, Rangers!" Nothing about those games.
I will be the beacon of positivity, but not about the first game.
Yeah. Well, 8-2 is there's no way to sugarcoat 8-2. So let's jump right. I know. Well,
Buffalo.
Yeah. Well, let's jump right into that. So they come out of the break and they get stomped by Buffalo. It's not even a game. It's 5-0 at the end of the first period. They win a game in Pittsburgh where they are completely and comprehensively and badly outplayed, but they win because of Igor and some lucky seeing eye wrist shots. They finally show, I would say, a little bit of life and play at least a representative game, about 70% of the game against the Islanders, who had an awful night themselves. Sorokin looked terrible, but the Rangers get the win. So in a lot of ways, and Dave, I'll go to you first, but this is almost like a worst case scenario to me, right? The Rangers come out of the break. They look terrible. Adam Fox gets hurt, but they win 2 out of 3. So all of a sudden they find themselves in the 9th place, right? The just below the cut line. They're 2 points out of a playoff spot as we record this, although Columbus is beating Detroit in regulation. Currently it's 3-1 as we record this, I think at the end of 2 periods. So if Columbus wins that game, the Rangers will be 4 points behind both Columbus and Detroit. Those are the 2 teams currently in the wild card spot. So they're very much in it. That will probably inform how they approach the deadline. But, as we talked about before this set of games, Dave, we wanted to see a lot better than what we saw despite the results.
This is truly the worst case scenario for them. I mean, what we said last week was it wasn't so much. It was both the points and the way they played. And they got points and they played like crap. So there was nothing about we're going to skip the Buffalo game. But even the Pittsburgh game, they shouldn't have won that game. Igor stole that by far. And the Islanders game, they got 15 shots on goal and they just went on a shooting percentage bender?
Yeah, I mean,
although they look good defensively. I'll give them
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they didn't give up too many grade A chances. They were a little loose in the beginning of the second period, but they're not generating any real offense. It just so happened that, Johnny Brodzinski took 3 wrist shots that found their way through traffic. Obviously, one of them was deflected by Matt Rempe, and good on him, right? And kind of interesting, right, how the fourth line really did set the example in that game for the rest of the team. And even in the Pittsburgh game, right, one of the few positive moments was Jimmy Vesey stepping up when the Rangers blew that lead. He came right back and got a goal by basically playing simple hockey, right? Gets the puck into a shooting area and fires it. And, that it's just the simplicity that the bottom 6 has played with has been a bright spot all year, right? Even when that bottom 6 was Cooley, Hedel, and Kakko, right? They were part of that bottom 6. those players have always played with a very direct, simple approach. They're dumping pucks in, they're recovering, a little bit of cycle, shots from the point, chaos in front. And if you get a chance to make a nice pass across the seam because you've created chaos, great. Valiquette talks about that all the time. You get the opposition out of the structure by firing pucks at the net, and then you can make your kind of fancy east-west plays. The top six has been a mess all year. It's the reason that they're not going anywhere, this team, most likely. And, they've really shown absolutely nothing in these first 3 games out of the break. The other big piece of news, which we'll get to in a little bit more detail as we talk about how the Rangers will and should approach the trade deadline, is the injury to Adam Fox, who took a very awkward fall while taking a penalty, by the way, in the Islander game. Very clearly a separated shoulder or a fractured collarbone or a really bad AC joint, like whatever it might be. It's enough to put him on IR. The Rangers have said he will probably be back in April, so it's probably a 4 to 6 week injury. I am of the mind he should be completely shut down. But I don't want to get into all that right now. I want to save my Fox rant for a little bit later, because JL, I do want to hear from you as someone who actually sat through those 2 very difficult hockey games in Buffalo and Pittsburgh. What was your thoughts having attended in person?
Weren't going to win just off of the way that they played, just the intensity level. You can tell that there was a bit of a lag. They weren't all focused, and it just kind of seemed out of sorts. And obviously Igor didn't look great at all. He was just off his game. He looked kind of shaky, kind of made you think there was something wrong with him possibly, but obviously he ended up dispelling that somewhat the following day. But just in terms of structure, they were just not cohesive, and Buffalo did a really good job at keeping them in the perimeter. They did have a bit of a jolt towards the middle of the first period after they were down like 1 or 2, but then you can just tell, once Igor was really letting in the soft ones, they just kind of stopped. And it's a shame because, Buffalo is a team you're supposed to beat, and you're supposed to honestly break the doors off. So that game was just a mess, so to speak, and they just didn't look engaged, and they were just kind of out of it, and it really didn't do anything well for them. But the next day, though, as much, I'll say this, and maybe I'm just being too optimistic when it comes to this. I do remember looking at the scoreboard and seeing the shots like 26-5. I did see that. But what I noticed though was that even though they weren't shooting enough, they weren't shooting a lot, excuse me, they looked a little bit more structured. And I think, the night before that game in Pittsburgh, it was a bit of a wake-up call. And even though they were, they were generating more chances, they looked a little bit more engaged. And obviously, some of the goals that went in on Igor shouldn't have happened. Like the Ryan Shea second goal that went off of the butt of K'Andre Miller shouldn't have gone in. But once they started getting settled in, they played a decent defense just against Pittsburgh, which is probably not saying much, but they were definitely looking more like a team. They were generating a lot more. The first and second, JT Miller was phenomenal. He definitely did help them a lot. He was the star. Jimmy Vesey looked great. Will Cooley looked fantastic. Granted, it was against a goalie that wasn't exactly the greatest, but sometimes you just need those, crappy wins to kind of get you back on. And I think what I've noticed about this team, and we saw that they can do it with their run in January, is that for some reason this team needs like a ramp up period in terms of getting back to where they need to be, because progressively they are getting better. It's not the greatest, I'll admit that. I'm not stupid. They're not blowing the doors off of teams, but they're at least finding ways to win. And I think good teams can do that. And hopefully that trend continues. And it sucks that Fox isn't going to play later tonight, as this is going to be released on Friday. It's kind of tough not having Fox against the strong Toronto Maple Leafs team. But, just from what I saw, it wasn't the most encouraging 2 games out there. But at the same time, they didn't look too disheveled after the second game. They just didn't shoot the puck, and Pittsburgh was just throwing it on net. They were able to hold them off. Igor played well, and they just did enough to win. And Obviously, we saw how it ended up translating in the Islander game where they looked phenomenal defensively. And, they just need to generate more shots on goal. I think one of the things I noticed too was that they're trying too much. And you saw on Tuesday night where basically the simplicity of just throwing pucks on net ended up working. I think that has to kind of echo to the top six outside of JT Miller. But just as a quick summation of what happened over the weekend, game one, crap. But then the second game, they slowly began to get back to form. And even though they gave up a ton of shots, which is a little concerning, they were definitely more of a team that day. And it's nice to go out of there with a win. And also, thank you to the Pittsburgh fans who were giving me the finger for no reason because all I did was cheer for my team. But that's okay. That's all right.
What do you
No need
expect?
to worry. There are, it's a great city, but the fans outside of, they're great people, but when it comes to their sports, they get salty and they just kept telling, when was the last time you won a cup? 1994. I said, yeah, get some new insults, buddy. You guys won 2 Stanley Cups in a row and you're going to trash me about that? Whatever. But yeah.
I will say that the third period was their best in the Pittsburgh game too. Like I think the Penguins only had 6 shots on goal. The Rangers again weren't exactly juggernauts offensively, but it was enough to win against a subpar goalie. And yeah, to your point, JL, like sometimes you just need the points to get your mind right. And, they are kind of rebuilding their game. But the lack of urgency to me was alarming, especially just coming out of the break, knowing where they're at, knowing that it is a soft schedule that you want to take advantage of. Not exactly the sign of a team that understands the assignment. I don't know if that's the coaching staff. I don't know if that's something else, if it's a lingering problem with the lack of leadership among the players. How many times can Vincent Trocheck and JT Miller give post-game interviews where they say like, that's unacceptable? JT Miller's been here for like 5 minutes and he's had to say that like 3 times already. Like that's not a good sign. Dave, I want to jump over to the Fox injury now. And before we get into that and how it kind of informs the deadline approach, I want to hear your what do you make of his season so far, or what was your overall assessment of how he'd played? Because there have been, I think, takes at both ends of the spectrum here, where you've got jerks like Jason Demers going on podcasts and saying like, I hear from guys around the league that he's easy to play against, and they love playing against Adam Fox in the playoffs. And then you have folks who are, and again, look, I'm all. I'm very pro analytics and I totally understand that side of the argument, right? But like people are just posting Adam Fox's analytics. And I think even though they look positive, I think it's pretty easy to see that he has not been himself this year. So what do you make of his season so far, Dave?
I don't think we can fairly evaluate his season when he's dragging around the corpse of Ryan Lindgren. I don't think it's fair. I mean, we were saying the same thing about Ryan McDonough and how he looked when he was dragging around Dan Girardi for God knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, has he looked good? He's looked off since that knee injury in the playoffs.
That's exactly my thought. Yeah. I don't think he's been healthy since that.
Yep. And I think this shoulder injury should be a blessing in disguise. Shut the guy down. The Ranger, there is absolutely nothing over the last 6-7 games split between the Four Nations break that has said to me that this team deserves another shot at the cup this year. They deserve Drury buying and selling off more assets to bring in short-term rentals at defense and third line center to go for another run. Nothing has shown us that. And the Fox injury tells us that they should shut him down, get him back to what he should be, and maybe all the haters that are few and far between but loud, maybe they'll actually back off and realize, okay, maybe he wasn't healthy and maybe dragging around Ryan Lindgren isn't the best time to evaluate him. But on that whole, he's easy to play against in the playoffs because he doesn't go into the corners. That's not his game.
It's also not true, actually. He's a very good defensive player. His defensive metrics are good. It's not just shot generation. So I agree. I think that's bunk. I agree.
They're talking about specifically going into corners and being the guy that grinds it out and like going and laying a hit, laying out a body. I mean, that's never been his game. Like,
No.
Give me a break with that. Come on. Like, if that's like telling us that Matt Rempe is a bust because he doesn't put up 70 points a year. It's not his game. telling us that Artemi Panarin is the worst penalty killer ever and easy to play against. Not his game. Why is it okay for us to have one-dimensional defensive players, but the second somebody who puts up a lot of points doesn't go into a corner because it's not his game, or for the play didn't call for it, we're calling him out for being soft? Are you kidding me? Do you actually understand what hockey is? You can't have 12 Matt Rempes or 12 Ryan Lindgrens out there. Well, Ryan Lindgren in his prime.
Right.
Ryan Lindgren at 23 years old. There we go. You can't have a team that's all that because you're one-dimensional, you're easy to play against. A team that is entirely north-south is easy to defend. And a team that is entirely east-west is easy to defend. A team that only goes into the corners is easy to defend against because guess what? The high slot's open. A team that only defends the high danger areas is easy to play against because guess what? The tops of the circles are open. Like, you need balance, and you need guys that bring different flavors of different types of games to the ice. You find the best chemistry that works. You find the system that works for the players you have, and you go out there and you make teams play your game. The Rangers don't have a good balance, and the Rangers have not forced teams to play their game. So if you're going to go out there and say Adam Fox is bad because he doesn't go to the corners, I say you have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what hockey is. You have no idea how to analyze the game. I don't care if you played at the professional level. You have no idea how to analyze the game. There's a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think, my take on Fox is that he's not healthy. I mean, before the injury in the Islander game, the Rangers had a power play. They were struggling. It was not a good power play. And, a puck got cleared past Fox and he was trying to chase it down. And look, he's never been the fastest, but there's usually a little bit more fluidity and sort of like power in his stride. And he just had nothing. He was, and I forget who it was. Maybe it was Brock Nelson or someone from the Islanders chasing him down, a good skater, but not one of the elite burner guys. And they like flew past him, like to the point where Fox looked like he was going men's league speed in a pro game. And that was alarming to me. And it's looked like that for most of this year and going back to last year after he, came back from the injury and then re-injured it in the playoffs. So I suspect he hasn't been healthy. And I'm totally on board with you, Dave, that I think he should be shut down. And I do want to touch on, and I want to get JL, if you have a take on Fox, obviously I want to hear that, but just quickly what you said there at the end, Dave, about like forcing teams to play your style of game, right? Like having an identity and then augmenting that and playing to it. That's one of my main sort of overarching things about this year's Rangers is that, look, they have never been in a decade now, it's 2025. Like they've never been a good Corsi percentage or expected goals percentage team. Like the best versions of the Rangers have been right around 50 or 51%, right? But even those teams that had those less than, stellar numbers definitely had an identity, right? Under AV, they were more of a counterattacking team. So they weren't going to set up shop in the offensive zone, but they were going to get a lot of chances off the rush. They played at a very high pace. Under Gallant and even the first season under Laviolette, we know the familiar refrain, right? Goaltending and special teams. That was the identity for better or worse, and just be decent enough 5-on-5, especially defensively. They were. This year, that hasn't been the case. And just, it's so stark to me every time I watch this team that like, they just are completely incapable of putting a game on their terms against any opponent, right? Good team, bad team. And I think I posted this on Blue Sky, in a fit of frustration watching them, I think during the early parts of the Islander game, which were not great. Like, it's just, I feel like they could actually get worked over by an AHL team right now. Like, I feel like an AHL team would outshoot them in a game, the way they're playing. They might not win because the Rangers have a ton more talent and better goaltending and all that stuff. But I think the Rangers would have problems dealing with and putting their imprint on a game, even against an AHL team right now. That might sound extreme, but that's how bad I think they are at expressing an identity and playing a discernible style of hockey. Again, like, I'm not talking about raw expected goals numbers here or scoring chance totals or shot totals, but like, they just don't play a game. They go out there and they basically are like, all right, what's going to happen tonight? They let the game come to them. And that's why they've given up like 19 goals. It's happened to them, I think 19 or 20 times this year, where they've allowed a goal in the first 5 minutes of the game, because they're basically waiting for something to happen as opposed to knowing what the plan is and attacking the game. So sorry, I had to get that one off my chest, but it kind of followed exactly from what Dave said earlier. JL, what are your quick thoughts on Fox? And then I want to get to some of the trade stuff and questions as well.
So I think, like you said, it's going to be a blessing in disguise that Fox gets to sit. That knee injury has to be worse than what it seems, because Fox was definitely a lot more nimble before getting taken out by Aho, and then obviously getting taken out by Nick Jensen. So clearly he's working through something. The consensus was that he was going to get surgery, which, apparently they said he wasn't going to, but
right. He never did. Yeah, no, there was no procedure. I thought
there
was going to, right. And they just opted for rehab, which seems like a mistake.
Right. So you can, you mentioned, I distinctly remember the incident you were talking about, and I think it was against Brock Nelson, where we were going shorthanded and he's just kind of, looking slow. And like you said, he was never a good skater, like an elite skater to begin with. But then, he's good enough to where he can move the puck at a high level. And just this season just hasn't really been evident of that. And I think that's been the thing about him the most is he's not as mobile. He doesn't have to be quick to be mobile. He's a smart defenseman. And the discourse surrounding him online is probably some of the most mind-numbingly stupid discourse I've ever seen, because if you just look at just the raw numbers of just him being there as is, he's arguably probably our best defenseman. And he generates.
What do you mean arguably?
That's not arguably. Yeah, no, he is the
What do you
Rangers.
mean arguably?
No, he is. No.
By
You guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
So he is the Rangers' best defenseman. So I think the reason why a lot of this discourse is coming around is because people
are
think
stupid.
Well, yeah, that's one. But also, two, people think that he is Cale Makar. Okay. They are not the same defenseman. Okay. These news outlets and these media outlets obviously like to pit them against each other, but they are not the same type of defenseman. Cale Makar is a speedy guy. He is an above average elite skater.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yes.
But where does Fox trump him on? Fox trumps him on knowledge, IQ, defensive positioning. Adam Fox is a better defensive defenseman than Cale Makar. That's not to say that Cale Makar is bad. He's not. He's one of the best in the game.
No, but you're right about that. Fox is a better defensive. His defensive game is better than Makar's. I agree with that.
Right.
I'd argue when Fox is healthy, he's more shifty and mobile, not speedster. And there's a difference between speed and agility.
Right. He's agile. It's agility. Yes, definitely.
Right. And you saw that when Fox won the Vezina. Not the Vezina, the Norris. Sorry, I'm thinking I got goalies on the brain. And you saw when Fox won the Norris. They saw right that this guy is a smart. He's very similar to the way Brian Leetch used to play. Obviously, I think Brian Leetch was probably a little bit of a better skater, of course.
Yes, he was.
But
Leetch was an incredible skater. Not like pure foot speed, but like a very powerful, efficient, like top level skater. Yeah.
Right. So you see the similarities with that. So I think what a lot of Ranger fans want to see, and again, you touched on it too, is that, these guys are, you're not going to have the same type of player. Adam Fox is, like you said, not going to go down to the corners and get the grit, pushing a guy up against the boards and making a big hit, whatever. It's shocking when he does get a big hit because you genuinely don't expect it. But at the same time, he needs his legs for his game to work. And again, you also mentioned the Ryan Lindgren effect. I mean, you would think that this fan base would know and be able to judge it properly, having watched Ryan McDonough carry around the one-legged Dan Girardi. And that's no disrespect to G. That's just how he was at that point of his career.
Well, yeah, he'd broken down.
Yeah. So,
at least he was in his 30s when he broke down.
Right.
Yeah, Lindgren has just fallen off a cliff in his 20s. It's crazy.
Right. And so, you even saw it during the Four Nations tournament that, Fox would play with either Noah Hannafin or Zach Werenski, they looked phenomenal. Everybody, I just never understood why everybody thinks that offensive defensemen are just going to consistently just skate the puck up and score 20 goals. That's an anomaly. People don't realize that kind of thing is an anomaly, and most of those defensemen who get goals like that more than likely are on the power play. So yeah, is he having a down year? Absolutely, from all the factors that we mentioned. But the fact that people are celebrating that he's not going to be around and think that the team is going to be better off. Listen, I am the world's optimist. I'm probably going to be more optimistic than anyone would ever be here. And I think that they even still have a flying chance even without Fox. But to say that they're better off without having him, and just to kind of follow into that briefly on the deadline impact, I know someone had mentioned that when they blew it up, they were about the same amount of points out. I think they were 3 points out of a playoff spot when they decided to blow it up. But I think it's a bit different in terms of just the situation a team is in. That team, whatever they were doing in terms to win games, was unsustainable. And what do you mean? They're not winning games right now. What do you mean? I mean, they're still in it, but they don't look great. Yeah, but those guys, they were older, they were slower, they were on the way out. This team is not playing the greatest hockey they can, but they're miles better than that team was. What's the benefit of being single and just having all the time in the world to watch Rangers hockey? Is I watched a lot of those games and I was at a lot of those games too. A lot of people tend to forget how lifeless that team was after the Winter Classic that year. So this team is slightly different. They have a bit of a rejuvenated JT Miller, but also there's just more youth and they're quicker, even though they're not playing like it. And it's like I mentioned before, they just kind of need to just, you're right in that the initial, play off the bat of them not being urgent is concerning. And yes, that is still definitely a huge concern. But just in terms of just the team itself, and them kind of warming up, they're a lot better than that team in the Winter Classic. And I think because of that, even with the Fox injury, I think they're still going to buy. And I know Dave doesn't want them to do that. And to a degree, it would be kind of stupid if they sold off a ton of assets to try and get somebody. But at the same time, though, if it's manageable to where they can end up not trading anything that's monumental to where they can make a run, like similar to what they did last year with Wenberg and Roslovic, I think just to get a shot at a kick of the can of the playoffs would probably be enough, because you never know what can happen in the playoffs. You just have to get there first. And that all depends on whether or not Drury and Dolan see that they kind of need to add. And honestly, I think they're going to either try and make a move to supplement, but it's not going to be something that's groundbreaking because they already kind of did that with JT Miller. So
Yeah.
in terms of Fox, look, again, I'm a natural optimist. I think they make it. You can tell me I'm wrong if they don't, but I think that even in their crappy moments, good teams learn how to win games in their worst moments. I mean, I'm probably not going to think that they're going to win the Stanley Cup this year. Let's be real here. But honestly, you never know, and maybe they'll surprise us. But in terms of Fox, I hate the discourse that surrounds him. Like I hate the discourse that surrounds most of this team online, and I think I have to go touch grass at some point because it's just ridiculous.
There was somebody in my mentions on Blue Sky, mind you. I'm done with the other site on Blue Sky, who said Adam Fox has turned into Sanders Ozelinsh.
Oh my god!
And I'm just like, what?
All right, so I pulled up his stats, not his playoff stats, and I do think it's worth remembering. In 21-22, which was the really fun run to the conference final where they lost to Tampa, he had 23 points in 20 playoff games. He was over a point per point. He had insane. 5 goals and 18 assists. He was playing 26 and a half minutes a game. But that, by the way, is the most interesting thing to me. And it does make you wonder about the physical toll that, and look, maybe this is something that Fox needs to develop, right? As he gets into his career, how does he condition himself? Does he add a little bit of muscle to be able to absorb a little bit more over a long season, whatever it may be? But his minutes have been, he's played 3 less minutes in both of the playoff runs after that, right? So he was averaging 26 and a half minutes in 21-22. And then in the sweep against the Devils, or not the sweep, the 7-game series, they lost to the Devils 23 minutes. And then last year, 23-58. So about 24 minutes in the run to the conference final and the loss to Florida. That's also 4 fewer games because obviously the Rangers, won their first 7 playoff games last year. point is that, when he is right, he's one of the 2 or 3 best defensemen on the planet. So I think everybody needs to pump the brakes on like, oh, he's like soft and he's becoming Sandis Lynch. Like that couldn't be further from the truth. I will say that you hope that he isn't one of these guys where like the injuries start piling up and the 21-22 season and playoff run is like the best that we'll ever see. Because look, it is possible. Like he could still have a ton of really good seasons, but I mean, that's also the year he won the Norris, right? Did he win the Norris in 21-22? No, he won it the year before.
So.
No, it was 2021 actually. It was the year before he won the Norris.
He won the Norris in 2021, really?
Yeah, it was 2021.
Oh, close.
Regardless of that. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to call that out. Yeah.
I want to call out one thing too. If you look at his regular season stats this year, his assist numbers are right up where they should be.
Yeah.
It's the on-ice shooting percentage. He is just in a black hole right now, and that's because the top lines on this team aren't scoring. The power play isn't scoring.
Yeah, that's true.
I would kill to have last year's top 6 and this year's bottom 6.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
That team wins a cup.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good point.
True monkey bullshit.
The comparison you made, and this is a good segue into kind of the trade deadline, stuff. The comparison you made with the team that obviously was disbanded before the letter was sent out in February of 2018, I think is a good comparison. What I will say about this current team is that I think they're already in the midst of turning it over, right? I mean, that's clearly what Drury wanted to do going back to last summer. He already started the process by offloading Trouba, trading Kakko, bringing in JT Miller, right? So like we know that this team is going to look substantially different next year. It's just a matter of what they do between now and March 7th, right? Is the trade deadline. So Dave, what's your gut feeling here? All right, let's imagine the Rangers have 3 or 4 games between now and the deadline. Let's just, for argument's sake, say they go 2-2. They're playing the Leafs, Predators, Islanders, and Caps all at home. I'm just going to say they go 2-2. They've been a 500 team all year. Let's just assume they keep that track. They stay on that track. They're at, they have 66 points. That they're probably 2 to 3 points out of a playoff spot in a tie or in a huge blender with 4 or 5 other teams for those 2 wildcard spots. Although funnily enough, only like maybe 5 or 6 points behind the Devils, who are actually playing horribly. And it's kind of funny to see. But what's your gut feeling? Rangers go 2-2 these next 4 games. How do they approach the trade deadline?
What I want them to do or what I think Drury does?
Well, both.
So my answer is there is absolutely no reason why they should be buying. Sell off the unrestricted free agents, recoup some picks, retool for next year, make the big deals at the draft. That's when you move, if you can, your Zibanejad, maybe you move Kreider then. I think they can move Panarin this offseason, this deadline. I don't think they will. What Drury probably does is he gets rid of Brian Lindgren. I don't think he's truly that blind that he sees Lindgren. I can't imagine him being that blind. I think he gets rid of Lindgren for whatever. And I am going to put myself out there on this one. I think Panarin is dealt for major pieces at the deadline.
He has been,
whether or not that works
lately.
Yeah.
And he almost to the point where I wonder if his agent has told him like, hey, they're shopping you. Like that's what it seems like. But anyway.
I wouldn't be surprised because first off, Panarin is still a 100-point player. He has shown that he can score clutch overtime goals in the playoffs. And teams get him for 2 runs, and the Rangers have the cap space to eat 50% of the contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, Colorado just traded Mikko Rantanen, so there is precedent for this. And if you could get a Marty Necas type back that fits your style and your plan moving forward, it's worth exploring.
The question is what kind of defenseman is what type of true top pair left defenseman would be available. And I keep going back to Colorado and Sam Girard, and if I keep doing this, I think Hope is going to reach through the screen and strangle me because I keep bringing him up. But that's the kind of guy you go after. Whether or not Colorado does it, I doubt. But
Well, they might.
they might. I can't see Colorado doing that, but I don't know. There is not a single other defenseman I can see a playoff team trading in exchange for Artemi Panarin, and he's going to go to a Western Conference team. We're going to have to be very clear on that too.
Yeah.
So
I like your thought here. I will say this, and I don't know how much this actually matters. I think it might. If they acquired Sam Girard specifically, and paired him with Fox, yes, probably would be a really good top pairing in most cases. That would probably be the smallest top defensive pairing in the history of the NHL because they are both undersized players. And
God, yeah, you're right. There's no way Drury does that.
Yeah, no way. And honestly, I have to admit, I think it's probably not it wouldn't. How do I phrase this? I would agree with the principle that like size should be somewhat of a factor. I mean, look, the other thing they could do is just freaking play Keandre Miller with Fox for 50 games and see if that could be the actual top pair, and then get a guy like Sam Girard anyway to anchor the second pair. Like, you can have both, and Keandre's got plenty of size. So, but look, I do think that it is a common thread. The teams that win the Stanley Cup, like there is size there, and it's not size for the sake of size, but it's like your body needs to absorb a ton of punishment to win a Stanley Cup. Like you just need guys who are built to survive the gauntlet. And if you've got guys the size of Sam Girard and Adam Fox getting pounded into the boards for 8 straight weeks during a Stanley Cup, like, is that, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe I'm making too much of that, but that would be probably the most undersized top pair in the NHL.
So I'm also looking at Minnesota just because I have no idea what goes on in Minnesota's minds, but they have a decent enough blue line where maybe they might want Panarin to help replace Kaprizov's production. I don't know. I can't. If you're dealing Panarin, you have to nail that trade, and I'm assuming Kreider at this point is draft day trades because of the injuries.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it. JL, do you want to go to maybe the poll that you did? Because I think that might be pertinent here, or we could go to the questions. I'll let you kind of choose your own adventure here.
All right, so let's go. I'm going to go to the poll first because there were some interesting responses to the poll that I put. A lot of the replies came from Blue Sky, but I'll just go to the results on Twitter.
What was the poll?
So the poll, I tweeted this out as the
Dave didn't even know the poll
was going on. Yeah.
Oh, give me a break.
I tagged him. I tagged him in the post too. Goodness gracious, Dave.
Oh, you tagged me in it?
I did. That is correct.
First off, can't you not do polls on Blue Sky? Hold on.
No, you can't. I looked. You can't.
Yeah, that was free response. Yeah, no, it's a Twitter poll, right? So Dave's not on, or X, whatever, but the other side.
Well,
whatever.
he didn't. Yeah. So I tweeted out and also posted on Blue Sky. So with JT Miller scoring and coming off a strong game against the Penguins, do you think the trade was still worth it? So we got a total of 29 votes. We have 93.1% said yes, and then a 6.9% said no. So I asked the same question on Blue Sky, and we got a couple of responses because it was a call for responses, and this is just what I was able to get so far. So we got about 3-4 responses, but still pretty good nonetheless. Well, it says 5 here, but let me just double check that. But yeah, so the first response comes from Gerard Gallant slander account at allentanderson.bsky.social, and he says, in regards to JT Miller, if he keeps his play up for 2-3 years and not decline while the team gets fixed around him, emphatically yes. It doesn't matter how well he plays this year, though, because we're not and will not be contenders. I'll say I've been enjoying him a lot more than I thought I would. This next reply comes from Lyndon Washington at hoshposh.bsky.social, and he writes, yes, added more grit and leadership to the dressing room that a younger player would not be able to. This next response comes from JW at JWPINNYC at bsky.social, and they write, no, you're not going to shoot 30% for the rest of the season. They're not controlling play at all, even against these middling teams. And then finally, this last one comes from Jeff Yerger at jyergs.bsky.social, and he says, no, we should be sellers. Now, it does say, let's see, that's 1, 2, 3. Okay. So basically, the consensus is that it's a lot of people tend to agree with it, although there were some dissenters on Blue Sky, but the sentiment seems to kind of be the same in the sense that a lot of people seem to have liked the trade. I think a lot of what rings true, at least in the first response, is that you just hope that he doesn't fall off a cliff like Zibanejad did at one point, where the team has to try and rebuild around, or retool rather. I have to be careful how I use that. Retool around him, you know, which is definitely a fair assessment because, you know, like you guys mentioned before, JT Miller, the trade, it was, the team had already gone a significant overhaul on just defense alone with getting rid of Truba and obviously getting rid of Capo Caco on the forward ranks, and then obviously getting rid of Filipino. So that's pretty much a pretty decent chunk of the team from last season. And then obviously, replacing Barclay Goodrow with, Sam Carrick, and, basically having incredibly productive and useful bottom six. A lot of it has really changed from the previous season. So the only real, couple adjustment that they need to do is get, bigger defensemen and, work on the forward core. So that's just that poll that I put out. Thank you to everyone who took the time out to vote or respond. So, I appreciate your support and we thank you for the interaction. Now we're going to go to some questions here. So we'll jump right into it. Let me just pull up the thing here on Blue Sky. So
hold on. Before we get to the questions, do either one of you think the Rangers should buy?
I do.
No, I don't.
I do.
Especially with Fox Herd. I'm like,
Okay.
sell everything not nailed to the floor. Sell the friggin' logo at center ice that has been on that ice for 20 years now. Like, this franchise needs like a full refresh, by the way. With Sam retiring too, we're gonna have new voices in the booth. Let's see like some new logo designs at center. Like, give me, even if they go retro with like they have like the two small Ranger logos in the circle at one point, like in the early 90s. Like, I want it to look and feel different. Like it just feels very stale and stagnant to me across the board. So start it now, sell it, sell, and gear up for next year, because like it does not need to be a rebuild. To JL's point, this is a retool. They can do what, in some ways, like, look, I don't want to be this guy who always refers to 1994, but the very famous thing that everybody reminds you of is that they missed the playoffs in 92, 93. And they didn't make a ton of changes, but they did mid-season in 93, 94, and they won the cup. Like, if this team is on some sort of trajectory and this is a small bump in the road, fine, but you've got to get this offseason right. If you don't get this offseason right, we're headed for the dark ages. That's my take.
So
JL, I want to know, if you're buying, are you buying traditional rentals, picks, prospects for 1 year stopgaps, or are you talking guys with term?
Well, that all depends on what's out there, truth be told. I think with the JT Miller trade, I think Drury's definitely open to looking for someone who they can carry into next season, because that seems to be something that he's been wanting to do. But for now, if that option isn't available, at least on defense, because to me, I think it's a lot easier to do the things that you guys want in the summer than it is right now. I don't think a lot of people want what we have, truth be told. I think the only one that I think would really make sort of a decent dent is Riley Smith. And this is not a knock on Chris Kreider, but I don't think the Rangers would get as much of him now than they would in the summer, or at least on the draft day. Because I feel like when the draft, you have a little bit more leverage. He has term, and it just would be easier for them to kind of make a deal instead of right now, because just generally speaking, unless it's like a can't miss thing, teams are really tentative around this time of year. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at last season as an example. I mean, you had players who could have been moved, not just on the Rangers, but on other teams. Like Pavel Buchnevich could have been moved.
Jordan
Um,
Eberle, that was the big one for me. And I was
Jordan
like,
Eberle, and then
the
they
Kraken are
stick
such
around.
fucking cowards because they still stink.
Yeah, right. So I think just in the position.
That was
Yeah.
not me that dropped the. That's not me that made this a mature
Sorry.
one. I love it. It wasn't me this time.
I'm on no sleep, and I had one beer, and I'm cursing. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I love it. This is great.
He's in a dedicated room now, so he feels like he has to let it all out. I love
That's
it.
true.
Yeah, the kids
but
don't have to worry about repeating what you say.
no, and so that's pretty good. So I think that a lot of the big moves that people want the Rangers to make, it's going to happen in the offseason, and Drury has shown that he's been capable of making the deal that nobody wants to make in the offseason. And look, I know he's not the greatest, but he's not the worst GM either. I mean, could he make some better moves? Could he have handled things a little bit better? Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and kiss the guys, but I've seen executives worse than him, Peter Chiarelli, Mike Milbury. So he like you guys said, he knows that there's a problem, and you have to be aware of the fact that Lindgren's a pylon. So I just think with this deadline, I think they're going to buy, but I think it's going to be very similar. If they're going to get a guy, at least defensively, it's going to be a guy similar to like a Justin Braun, but just with a little bit more upside. So kind of like that gritty, defenseman who can, or at least somebody who can help him play in the corners, who is essentially not going to cost you much. Because let's be real here. They're 2 points out. Depending on how the Columbus-Detroit game goes, they're 2 points out. James Dolan's not going to approve of them saying, all right, well, adios. So I think we just kind of have to get that out of our heads. Depending on what's available, they're either going to add or they're going to just make little alterations here and there, and then just kind of see what happens from there. That's just the vibe I get. Drury doesn't strike me as the kind of guy to make a really big leap during the season, unless it's like a trade for like JT Miller. But at least on the other aspects, I think they're gonna buy, but moderately, and I think that they're gonna make a run for it. They are. I mean, and honestly, I can't blame them because they're close after. You blame everybody for just looking at you the wrong way. So I mean,
I will say
No.
this.
I get mad at people for looking at me the wrong way. I don't blame them. I mean, I would look at me funny too. I'm funny looking.
I'll say this, and then we'll get to the questions. Like, the irony about all this is that very few people are talking about like plan C, right? So plan A would be selling, plan B would be buying. Like, how about calling up some kids, like, and actually giving them shots, right? So, because this is the type of team to me too that is like ripe for that type of approach where you like infuse, like, give me Berard, Othman, Zach Jones. We know that's not going to happen, but like, I just feel like that would be the easiest way to try and like jumpstart this thing and introduce a little bit of a breath of fresh air without needing to go through the excruciating process of like, are we going to trade people? What are these guys worth? What do we want back? Do we need to commit to buying or selling? Like, I thought Othman played a pretty solid game against the Islanders. I think he should be in a top 9 role. Obviously it's fine. It worked out with him on the 4th line on Tuesday night, but like, man, give him some time in the top 9. Like there's other guys I think that just, you might as well start giving people a look. Gabe Perreault, as soon as Boston College's season ends, should be here and playing. Like this is the type of year to do that, where you find out what you have going into next year. Because look, with the salary cap, even with the cap going up, every team, I mean, Tampa Bay was famous for this. Like, you'd be like, who the hell is this guy that has been in their system that's scoring huge goals in the playoffs? Like Ross Colton, before they moved on from him, obviously, but he was like a big part of it, one of those cup teams. Like, he was just some guy they called up from Syracuse. Like the Rangers, I just don't think they leverage their high draft picks or their good draft picks. Like Adam Sikora hasn't seen a minute at the NHL level. That seems crazy.
He's also only 20 years old.
I understand that, but like plenty of teams are playing 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
So I that's just one other thought, and I just want to get that out before we get to the questions. But like, there is a world where you sell a couple
thought,
pieces, but then bring up some young kids, or buy
Well,
one piece that has term, and then bring up some kids and see what happens.
And that's why you trade Panarin and Kreider in the offseason, because
Right.
I'm assuming he tanked his value, and Smith. You trade them to bring up an Othman. You trade them to bring up a Berard, assuming he is healed from his concussion, rumored concussion, and you go from there. Like that's what you have to start transitioning them. But the question is, will Dolan allow it?
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's
look,
the
and
wild
then,
card.
yeah. And the
Yeah,
other
that's
thing is, like, you want them to commit to the youth, and they did with Alexi Lafreniere, and he's been awful since he signed his extension. I mean, what an invisible
And then they
player.
traded Kako and Hedel. So what the
I
hell?
know. I know. No, it seems like it's, and with them especially, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because they commit to Laugh, and he's been awful. Kako was kind of just like doing his usual thing. He just was not a good fit here under two coaches or three coaches, going back to Quinn, and now he's a point per game player for Seattle. It's frustrating. So anyway, sorry, we've rambled on enough. What are these? Let's go to the question.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly before we move on to the questions is I like that idea of plan C, and I think honestly that will work if they ever were to go to that, because
I think it would work too.
Berard has shown in spurts, I mean, he's still young, that he can be a productive NHL player. And Othman, showed me a little bit something yesterday, and not yesterday, Tuesday. And I think that once you're able to move on from like a Smith or even a Jimmy Vesey, I think he would complement a guy like Will Cooley well.
Mhm.
And even a guy like Alexi Lafreniere to a degree. He's a little bit more tougher, and I think that those guys should be the next wave. And like you said, with the cap going up, get another player who can score you a ton of goals like a Panarin or even a Kreider could. And you just kind of go from there. But anyways, so I definitely agree with that. But let's get into the questions here. So we've got quite a few, decent amount. So this first question comes from Dan. His at danielpasses.bluesky.social, and he asks, do you think Lindgren will be a Ranger after this weekend?
Nope. Wait, this
No.
week? Oh, never mind. Sorry.
Or next week,
Well,
whatever. Yeah.
let's just say, well, you know what? Just to give him, benefit of that, let's just say at the deadline.
Nope.
No, yeah, I do think they'll trade him.
You know what? I will go the original question. He won't survive this weekend.
Wow.
I mean, considering the injuries, I think that'd be pretty bold, but
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, Miller's playing, and Fox is, a right defenseman, not a left defenseman.
Right.
Though it was pointed out that for some reason only the veterans can't play on their offside on the defense. Only the young kids are, and that's just odd to me.
Which is weird, but
it is very weird.
But I think also this might be the chance to see what Matthew Robertson finally has, even though that might not be much. But I mean, it could amount to something. I mean, the guy's been in the organization for almost 5-6 years now. He's got to show something at least.
Yeah. Also, I guess he's hurt, but Eric Brandstrom's an option as well now too. Which who has been a solid NHL player. Like, again,
right.
Not a bad piece to be thrown into the JT Miller trade. So I would like to see Brandstrom play if and when Lindgren is traded, assuming he's healthy.
Right. All right. Next question comes from Gerard Gallant slander account, Alan T. Anderson.bsky.social, and he asks, Fox being out, while a definite negative, creates an interesting defense scenario, especially is capitalized, if Miller is injured too. The question is, do we finally, in capital letters, see Ryan Lindgren's minutes drop now that he no longer has coattails to ride? And he also asked, does Schneider find his way into the top 4? What does the blue line look like now?
Well, they practiced on Thursday, so one of us can search the line, the practice lines that
he was paired with Vakanainen.
Right.
So
which would be what? Would that be the third pair, I suppose?
Your guess is as good as mine, because the top pair then would be what? Schneider Jones?
Or Miller Borgen. Or probably Miller Borgen, because that's certainly the one that the coach would trust the most. Yeah.
Well, let me pull this up to make sure that we're right, because I think this is important.
It's Miller Borgen, it's Vakanainen, Lindgren,
and then Jones
and Schneider.
So that's not terrible. I just don't. Vakanainen's a very good defenseman. I just don't think that he's a good fit for Lindgren. But then again, I'm not the coach. I do like that he's keeping Miller Borgen together. I do like Jones and Schneider deployed out there. So yeah, no, I this is not the worst. I mean, I
I
think
mean,
they'll
it
be
would be, it would
okay,
it would be completely shocking to me if Zach Jones played more than Ryan Lindgren on Friday night or tonight. If you're listening to
which
us on Friday, I would
I
be shocked. So
I
I
think
think
that's the
Jones Schneider would be the bottom pair, and
which I don't understand, but I
yeah, me
mean,
either. No, it
whatever.
makes no sense. But
Whatever.
this is the stuff that it's all this is the thing too, right? Like it's all compound. It all compounds on each other, right? It's like it's a bunch of small mistakes that add up to a season like this. It isn't one big thing. Um,
Mhm.
so, and this is another one, right? Like again, and we'll see how they're deployed. And they're so banged up, and they're really just like they've been chasing this season since late November. But um, the logical thing to do would actually probably be to play. Um, I'd probably play Keandre Miller with like potentially with Schneider, like go back to that.
I
Slide
like
Borgen
that
down the
pair.
lineup because I think Schneider's probably a better defenseman than Borgen, even though he's been okay since he came here. He hasn't been good since his extension, of course. The
It
second they
seems like
handed him a huge contract, he's been worse than he was before he got the contract.
it
But
seems like every time somebody gets money, they just start to suck, but
that has
that's
been
neither here nor
well.
there.
But again, what does that tell you? This team does not have good vibes. As Mullick, and I appreciate your optimism, JL, but like they have all the signs of a team with bad vibes, and that's one of them. Every guy that's gotten paid, his performance has dropped like the second after he's gotten the contract. Shesterkin included, and I'm not really, I don't think he's not going to live up to that deal over the long term. But like Lafreniere has done nothing. Shesterkin has not been himself. Borgen got paid and has not been good. Like it's just bad vibes, and it tells you something about the fabric of the team that's just it's not strong. So again, we'll see. But frankly, like not to sound too negative, but like this defense group is probably not going to acquit itself well against the Toronto Maple Leafs, regardless of how it's arranged. We'll see.
I do find it hilarious that Vakanainen is now paired with Lindgren when last week we were talking about Vakanainen playing with Fox.
Right. Yes. Which would
There's some
make
kind
the
of
most
delicious monkey paw irony there with,
Oh
maybe
boy.
Vakanainen give him a look on the top pair and look what happens.
right.
Oh boy. Poor Vok. All right. Next question. This comes from dark11g.bsky.social, and he asks, do you think injuries to Fox and Miller change the New York Rangers' plan at the trade deadline?
It's a good
I don't think
question.
so.
So that the big word there is change, not not are they going to be buyers? Are they going to be sellers? It's does that at this point the Fox injury change what they were going to do? So were they going to be buyers, and now are they going to be sellers because they're not going to have Fox until April? That's an interesting question. That I don't know.
I don't know either. I think it is. I think they
don't-
do really value Fox, and I do think it's possible that they, have some level of self awareness and can look in the mirror and say, okay, we're a 500 team, and that's with Adam Fox. Even on a down year, he's got, he's almost a point per game, and, you know, yeah, like it would be kind of foolish. It would be kind of foolish to buy, staring
And
those circumstances in the face. And I think again, the much more low risk thing to do. And I think, look, I think James Dolan can be convinced. Again, it's easy to kind of just point to him and say like, yeah, the big bad scary guy is going to do the bad thing. Like generally, if he likes the executive, he trusts the executive. He was hands off with Sather and Gorton to a certain extent. He's been hands off with the Knicks since they hired Leon Rose, and that includes a couple of questionable moves that they have made, and less win now moves and more long term future. So like, to me, I don't think he's banging down Drury's door, being like, we have to get 2 playoff games for the revenue this year. Like, I don't think that's happening. I think if Drury said to him, like, listen, our best defenseman is hurt. And I suspect more than just Fox is hurt. By the way, I have a feeling we're going to hear. We know Vincent Trocheck has a broken finger. We know Kreider's banged up. We've all suspected Zibanejad's not been healthy all year. Like, it's very possible they are carrying around a hangover from last year's playoff run. And I think Drury could go into Dolan's office and say, hey, listen, the team's really banged up. It's been a tough year. We had to do what we had to do with Goodrow, Trouba, Kakko, etc. We just need to do the smart thing at this deadline, see where we get to with some young players in the lineup, and then go in guns blazing into next season. I think you could convince him of that. I think he's a somewhat reasonable man, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm torn on this one.
Yeah, it's I think just If they're still close enough by next week, I think they're gonna try and make an addition. Um, James Dolan, I have to kind of, you know, maybe somewhat disagree about Dolan. I think not to say that he's this sort of like dictator, but I think he would like to press to Drury because let's be real, he definitely has input. As much as people like to think he's hands off,
Mhm.
the guy has to pay attention. This makes him a ton of money. And he's kind of been a little bit more involved lately with the Rangers, whether you want to think that's a good thing or a bad thing. No owner is ever not gonna not fully not care. So I think, he's definitely Drury definitely has his trust, or Gordon Dolan rather trusts him a lot. So um I think though the mandate, I don't want to say mandate, but I guess sort of just the thing to do is just to try and see if you can add on. Um, or if they don't go to C, they either just get rid of Lindgren and just kind of stand pat and let someone else kind of fill the void in terms of on the back end. It's kind of tough. I think we'd have a better idea closer to the deadline in terms of where the team is at because these next couple of games could really actually at this point it's going to be make or break because you only have so much time left and you can only make up ground at so many points of the season that I think if they go into the next week where they just look like they're out of it, then I think that they probably do sort of, I guess, concede. And it sucks to say that because you're essentially still about a month out from the end of the season and there's still a lot of hockey left to be played. But if it gets to the point where it looks like there's going to be at the point of no return, I think they do make that move. But I still think that even with how close they are currently, I still think that they probably still try to at least add somewhat. And James Dolan definitely does pay attention more than he lets on. Has to.
So, two things. One, regarding Dolan, Suit has mentioned a couple of times that Drury is very good at communicating up to Dolan. And which is funny because Drury's terrible at communicating down to the players, but neither here nor there. So I think that matters. What that means, I don't exactly know because Drury is a wild card and Dolan is a billionaire and they can do whatever the hell they want, essentially, as we're seeing. But when it comes to changing the approach at the deadline, I don't think it changes the approach. I know that there's this deep-seated fear of mine that Drury's going to buy traditional rentals. I don't realistically, I don't see that happening. Like Rob said, they're too smart to see what's in front of them and be, oh, we can just get some rentals and we'll be good for the playoffs. I think they do. I think their plan has always been since end of December, regardless of the January run, was sell off the unrestricted free agents, Lindgren, Smith, and VZ. If they can find a trade for Panarin, I still think Panarin is not a Ranger next year. Whether it's deadline or draft day, I don't think he's a Ranger next year.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Kreider was going to be included in that, but his back spasms are clearly not going to facilitate a trade this year. I think they still look to do all of that, create some space for Othman and Berard because Berard has earned it. His play was great, and Othman looked good so far. I think they create winger spots for those two. I think they need to create a spot for Perreault next year just in case. And I think they dangle a Panarin or if they're able to, a Zibanejad to get a guy with term on defense. And so it's a combination buy, retool, plus sell traditional assets. I think that's always been the plan, and I think they stick to it. But I still have that deep-seated fear that they're going to trade Othman for Jordan Greenway.
Oh God,
What?
that would not be good.
The Rangers are scouting Carolina, Buffalo tonight as we record this. Hope put in the chat is probably Jordan Greenway. Hope is pretty
What about
dialed
Alex
in.
Tuck? Can we be a little more optimistic? Maybe it's Alex Tuck. I mean, Greenway's not a bad player, by the way, but you don't want
Greenway
to
is an
overpay.
unrestricted free agent. If they deal Othman for Jordan Greenway, I'm going to drive somewhere and throw Drury in the Hudson River.
That would be
But
terrible. Yeah, that would make no
move
sense.
would make no sense though. Like you have Matt Rempe.
Well, Greenway's a better player than Rempe, but he's a different player.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't.
Could it be Alex Tuck? Maybe. Does he actually play center?
Sometimes.
Maybe, but not. No, I think he's more of a winger though.
I wonder. Ryan McLeod would be. Huh.
Super fast, by the way.
That was so interesting. Vince tweeted about Ryan McLeod. He heard his name, and now the Rangers are scouting Buffalo.
Wasn't he on the Devils?
No, that was Michael. That's
Michael McLeod.
That's the Predator. That's the Predator.
Freezing.
Oh,
Wow.
you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Ryan is the brother. Ryan was on Edmonton.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, so
Got it.
Ryan McLeod is a center. He is
Mhm.
25.
fast.
He's a restricted free agent.
Crazy fast. Goodness gracious, that dude has.
Yeah. 30 points in 53 games this year.
I wonder if that's the deal. But the question is who?
Right.
Who?
I wouldn't.
Would you trade Othman? Would you trade Othman for McLeod 1-for-1?
No. I don't think so. I don't think he would cost that either. I don't think so. Rangers would have the leverage in that deal because, Buffalo can just fill that spot with a young guy that they have somewhere in the system. But also, you just say, here's a pick to, for your trouble.
What's
I
McLeod's
think-
contract?
Restricted free agent.
Restricted
2.1
free.
mil this year.
Right. So he'll probably get a raise because but not a big raise.
The dollar amount is 2.1 million, so I believe that is I can't keep up with the CBA anymore. I know it used to be anything over, I think it was like 1.5 million or 2 million. That was, you just had to match the current salary. I think there's a 5% increase. So 5% is what, 500,000. So roughly. So what, 2.63 million is the qualifying offer. I'm assuming he gets 4.5 for a third line center.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the worst thing. I mean, considering
Oh.
his skill set.
He's basically and he's a Filipino replacement, and he has almost the exact same scoring rate as Hedl.
Yep.
Yeah.
Similar
I'd be okay
size.
with that.
Yeah.
No, I'd be okay with that too. I like his speed.
And-
Like that's something I noticed when I was in Buffalo was that dude is fast. Like-
Okay, so I want to float one more to you guys because it's Buffalo and because Bowen Byram's name has been brought up a bunch of times. Would you do Miller and Othman for Byram and McLeod?
I don't know.
Oh. That's
I feel like Bowen Byram has always had a ton of like buzz around his name, but then I'm like,
He's
He would-
figured out his injury history.
yeah.
So he 56 games this year. I think that's every single game for Buffalo.
Mhm.
Colorado, he had some rough years where he didn't really play, but he got to Buffalo last season. What is it, 75 minus 2, 73 games last year. He's on pace for 80 this year.
He's a tough kid, right? Like he's kind of known as a physical player. They're not high penalty minute totals, but he's a pretty
Yeah.
tough kid.
6'1", 190, left-handed defenseman.
It's the right size for sure. Yeah.
yeah. I think because Keys definitely got a lot better, but I mean
The
That-
fact that
that's-
both of you are pausing makes me think this is decent. This is comparable value.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it is.
yeah.
And I have no
mean-
problem dealing Othman for a center. The Rangers need a center. They have 9,000 wingers.
Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
Well, it definitely helps. I mean, I've gotten a little tentative on trading Miller, not JT, obviously Keandre, but I mean, if Miller and Byram are essentially a wash, I think you do it. It just sucks that I think Othman still has some sort of value,
Yeah, he's a weird player though. I mean, and he's finally had a good run in Hartford, but he struggled for a couple of years. He's very inconsistent. He got hurt a lot.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of like, I would guess the view on him around the league is that he's like potentially like an empty calorie third line scorer in the NHL. I'm trying to think of a comparable player, but like, he could score you some goals because he's got a good shot and he'll go to the front of the net. But I don't know that there's a lot more there to his game. And look, I'm not speaking from a ton of personal knowledge there. Like I have not watched a ton of Brennan Othman, like a few highlights from Hartford, the handful of Ranger games he's played. I know that he killed it in juniors, but that's junior. So, I agree with Dave from a positional value perspective. Like if you can get a center for a winger in a bigger package like that, you probably do it. And that's also probably why Buffalo wouldn't do it, right? Because they would see that as like, all right, well, why are we getting a winger back unless they really feel like they need a scoring winger? I don't know. I don't know what Buffalo's thinking, and they don't either. They haven't made the playoffs in a long time.
Well, last time they made the playoffs, the Jets were also the New York Football Jets were also in the playoffs too. So it's been that bad for them up there. But anyways, all right, we have 2 more questions, and we're running a bit long tonight.
Mhm.
2 more questions.
There's a lot to talk about.
But yeah, exactly.
Apparently.
I mean, not necessarily a bad thing. This is from Captain Jack at nyr.bsky.social. Also, real quick, I just want to mention, I think Captain Jack kind of called me out a bit on a post about Messier. I wasn't exactly implying that he was terrible as a Ranger, but he wasn't exactly putting up the same numbers that he did in Edmonton. Obviously, Messier for a pretty good, maybe 2-3 year stretch with the Rangers was still pretty good, but then he just kind of was not the same anymore.
He was
Obviously,
pretty good until
he
he
also
left.
was
So he left,
instrumental
yeah.
in this. Messier is one of the main reasons why Zubov was traded.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm
So let's not forget that.
There was a
Messier
lot of
not-
drama with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Overall. He got Roger
so-
Nielsen fired. Yeah. There's a lot
Yeah,
more
there's
there,
a
but-
lot of crap there. Yeah.
So I as much as good as he did, obviously I'm not going to take that away. He had his moments, but I'm not saying he was he wasn't the worst, but he wasn't basically what I meant to say. He wasn't putting up the numbers that he put up in Edmonton is basically what I said. I'm not,
which is fair.
but anyways. So but yeah, so Captain Jack asks, what are your thoughts on Drury? 1, evaluating players. 2, drafting. 3, trades. 4, managing
Oh,
players.
jeez. Okay, I'm this because
It's for
I'm not
Dave.
going to be able to retain this. Hold on. What was number 1?
Number 1, evaluating players.
Like
He's
letter
biased.
grade.
He's biased.
Well, it just says, what are your thoughts? So
I think he's biased. I think he has tunnel vision on North-South North American players, and that's what he's going for.
I think that's
He
probably
doesn't
fair.
care if you're Artemi Panarin. He doesn't care if you're Mika Zibanejad or Pavel Buchnevich or Filip Chytil. If you're not a North-South, get in the corners, play North American style hockey, it seems like he doesn't want you on the team. And I think the moves that he's made reflect this.
I would say that he has had some good moments and has picked out some players that did fit at the time he acquired them. I think his first trade deadline, I guess I don't know if it was his first, but the one where they got Kopp, Vetrano, and Justin Braun, that was a really good trade deadline. That was it's very hard to overstate how good a trade deadline that was. Those are the perfect guys for that team. Remember, he got Vetrano early for very good value, like a 3rd or 4th round pick. Vetrano scored a ton of goals. Vetrano went on to sign a big contract. He's like a lock 30 goal scorer now in the NHL. And so Drury saw that, right? Like he saw that was the potential there, even if they couldn't retain him because of their own cap situation. He knew that's a guy worth taking a swing on. He did give Filip Chytil that contract extension. So while Dave, I hear what you're saying, and I do think there's some merit to it. That was a really good contract extension. And I think the only reason they pivoted on Chytil was because A, JT Miller became available, and B, Chytil's injury history, and especially what happened last year, where, he was out forever and was like almost back 3 or 4 separate times. Like, I think he was having, rightfully so, doubts about his long-term viability as an NHL player. There have definitely been misses. And, I think obviously the Barclay Goodrow contract comes to mind. The Pavel Buchnevich trade comes to mind. I guess those fall into those other categories. But in terms of like player evaluation, like he's like a C+, B-, C+, like slightly better than average or just around average. That's what I think.
The next one is trades.
It's like a C-. I feel like his great trades are offset by the Buchnevich trade, and I guess maybe the Kako trade is not looking great, especially if Borgen continues on his current trajectory.
I would give trades, excluding his first season, a solid B.
Hmm.
If you include that first season, it's got to be, it can't be more than a C, because the Rangers have been chasing that top line right winger since they traded Pavel Buchnevich, and it has cost them a ton of assets.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're including year one, it's got to be a D for me. If it's not including year one, then I give him a solid B.
I guess also just in context, you have to remember he got the team from Gordon and Davidson. So I think a lot of what he's tried to do is basically trying to, at least the first couple times, kind of clean up, quote unquote, their mess, I'd say. And for the last one, for 4, it says managing players. I'll give my thoughts after you guys answer yours, because mine are pretty quick.
Managing players. Oh God, I'll go last on this one. I'm long on this one.
Yeah, well, and like, look, in some ways, it's not necessarily his job to manage the players. That's the coach on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, managing the relationships, and I mean, it's bad. It's there has been, and really, I know this wasn't directly asked in the question, but there's just been way too much drama and sort of stuff playing out in public where I think most athletes understand that like hard decisions need to be made, and that people are not going to be happy about those decisions when they are made. But it's very famously Derek Jeter got very pissed off at Brian Cashman when he was negotiating his last contract, because he basically said, like, I don't care how this goes. I understand it's going to be difficult. Don't make it public. And basically Cashman went to the papers and made it public. Like he literally gave quotes like he can go see what the Red Sox are willing to pay him or whoever else wants to pay him. Like it got pretty nasty, and it was played out in the media. And Drury kind of did that too. Like everything he did with the text and all that other stuff, like he knew that was going to get out. So he tends to try and play mind games, and I don't like that, and I don't think it's effective, especially with this generation of athletes. So yeah, it's bad. It's like a D- or maybe an F here. But at the same time, like we've talked about this a lot this year, like the players do need to get over it and just play. And maybe that's on Laviolette, or maybe it's just on the individuals themselves, but like you can't dwell on it for 6 weeks after it happens. You do need to move on. So at least in the context of this season, I would have liked the team to have responded better to it. But yeah, Drury does himself no favors with that. And this goes back to the Kravtsov stuff as well. That was very publicly knowledgeable.
Drury needs somebody like can't believe this is coming out of mouth, a John Rosasco, to control the message getting to the media. And JR was very good at that. He let him go because Drury wants to control it, and he's bad at it. And what started in the beginning, and we are still seeing now, is he is too in the weeds with the players. At that level, you can't micromanage the players. You can't.
No,
Imagine
sure.
if you had, so where I work, you have staff level, managers, directors, AVPs, VPs. That's the hierarchy. Imagine a VP bypassing the AVP, the senior director, the senior manager, the manager, and micromanaging the staff level people. That's what Drury's doing. Like, you're too high up to do that. Get your head out of your ass. Remember what position you are. Let the coaching staff talk to the players. Let Jed Ortmeyer talk to the players. That's why you have them there. He is terrible with this. He can manage James Dolan pretty well, it sounds like, but that's it. He's terrible at communicating, at least from what I've seen. Opinion, obviously.
So I guess just to answer all of these really quick, because we do have one more question, and I think we should be good for the rest of the night, is evaluating players, I'd say a B. He's definitely found some gems. Team has been decent, has been able to, fill in some spots, some not so great. Drafting, I'd probably say B-. still need to see. The jury's out on a couple of the players he drafted, but it seems like there's been a lot of talent that he's brought in that's been, a lot higher upside kind of thing. Looks like the Perot, if all goes well, I think the Perot, draft, the pick will be a home run. Trades, C+, C- probably. Like you said, factor in the first season, but I don't really do that because that's also the COVID shortened season as well. I mean, they've been okay. I mean, not the greatest. Could have done a little bit better. While I was, okay with the deadline trades last year, I felt like they could have maybe done one more trade in that aspect. And then managing players, yeah, that's got to be like a D and F because got to get somebody to kind of smooth that over. And I think it's done a lot more damage than good. And the hubris that some of these people have tend to kind of get in the way of certain things. So I mean, it is what it is. All right. So if I am correct, I think this next question will be the final question. Let me just double check. Yes. So this next question will be the final question, if I can just load this up again. And this is more of a lighthearted question. This comes from Brian with a Y at simplehockeyfan.bsky.social. And he asks, so no questions about Frommer's Guide.
Nowhere near Berlin. I am distraught. Michelle Trachtenberg was one of my first crushes.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew where that was going at some point, but you're right. I knew the reaction got a little chuckle out of me, but yeah. Also, Dave, I don't know if you had said them throughout the podcast.
No, the
Yeah.
conversation never got to a point where I could just drop in some Euro Trip quotes. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. I can sit and recite that movie beginning to end, basically. And oh god, what a phenomenal movie! And 39 years old is just horrible. Apparently, it was liver failure.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
So
that one hurt.
Yep, I concur. But those are our questions. So thank you to everyone who took the time out to respond, reply. Keep sending us your questions.
I'm an idiot. You know what? I'm going to throw one out there. When it comes to managing players, Scotty doesn't know.
Nice.
Which
Even I know that. I mean, I know the movie, but not front to back like you.
The single greatest fake song ever, and one of the best cameos of all time.
Yeah, Matt Damon killed it 100%.
The cameo king, Matt Damon.
Matt Damon. That's phenomenal. Yeah. Oh boy.
Good stuff.
All right.
Long show, good show. Very quickly want to acknowledge the passing of Al Trautwig as well. Another tough loss.
Yes.
That voice of my childhood, essentially, watching the Rangers.
100%. And there are a ton of great tributes online. Check out Bruce Beck posted his. He did a little quick segment on the NBC night, local news. Alan Hahn, John Giannone. Go find some old videos of Al. He's a great interviewer too. That's one thing I haven't seen out there, but he asked awesome questions, like in the, and just off the cuff like this. I think that was one of the things that Bruce Beck said in his tribute was like, he literally would write like 5 or 6 notes on a clipboard. And that was his prep for like a night of pregame and postgame. And he could just talk extemporaneously and ask questions and tee up analysts and do highlights, like all that stuff with like very few handwritten notes. That is a skill. He's one of the reasons that the MSG broadcast was, it is still one of the best, but it was really, became what it is today in large part because of Al Trautwig. So voice of my childhood as well, Dave. Well said.
Yeah, I concur. Al was, I was telling this to someone the other day. It's like, when you watch sports feels like you're in this sort of time loop. And you guess you could say the same thing with Sam Rosen, is that you just don't expect them to either be there or not be there. You just expect them to always be there. And Al Trautwig and, Sam Rosen were always there. And Al was always the one that, essentially brought you into the broadcast and then led you out to it. And it's crazy to know that he did all that great work with such little prep. I mean, his resume speaks for itself. Did a ton of Olympics, Rangers, Knicks, Yankees, even to some extent Islanders.
Mhm.
The guy was quick and smart as a tack, and it would, just it was a very familiar voice and the voice of all of our childhoods, really. So, he will be missed. And it was a day when we lost him on the MSG broadcast, and obviously even sadder that we've lost him, in life. So, sad day. And, all the tributes were great. Check them out if you can. So Al Trautwig, one of the best to ever do it.
All right. Good show, guys. Thanks everyone for listening. Next time we talk to you, it will be a trade deadline edition. So more on that. Follow us on all the feeds. Keep listening, keep asking questions, keep responding to JL's poll questions, and we'll see you next time.